Most preppers obsess over gear lists and food storage. But here's what nobody tells you. The difference between surviving and not surviving a crisis has almost nothing to do with what you own. It's about following 11 unspoken rules that separate people who make it through from those who don't. And I'm going to be straight with you. Rule number 9 is so counterintuitive that even experienced preppers get it backwards, and it costs them everything. I'm Zach, and I've been prepping since 2012. Over those years, I've studied real survival situations, talked to people who've lived through disasters, and learned some hard lessons myself. Today, I'm breaking down the silent rules that actually matter when everything falls apart. These aren't the sexy tactical tips you see everywhere. These are the quiet principles that keep you alive when the noise settles and reality sets in. Let's jump into rule number 1. Rule number 1, your best gear is invisibility. Here's something most survival content gets completely wrong. Everyone talks about having the best tactical backpack, the most high-speed gear, the latest survival gadgets. But here's the truth. In a real crisis, the person with all that expensive, identifiable gear becomes the first target. Think about it this way. You're 3 days into a power outage. Most people haven't prepared at all. Suddenly you walk through your neighborhood wearing a plate carrier, tactical pants, and a bag covered in mollywebbing. What message are you sending? You're broadcasting that you have resources worth taking. The concept here is called the gray man principle, but it goes deeper than just blending in with clothes. It's about understanding that in a survival situation, being unremarkable is a tactical advantage. This means your bug-out bag shouldn't look like a bug-out bag. It should look like a regular backpack someone might take to work or the gym. Your everyday carry shouldn't scream tactical operator. It should look like what any normal person might have on them. Back in 2019, I was helping a friend organize his preparedness supplies, and he had everything in military surplus containers with obvious labels. I asked him, if someone breaks into your garage looking for supplies, what are they going to grab first? The containers that scream tactical preparedness, or the random cardboard boxes? He got it immediately and spent that weekend reorganizing everything into plain sight but unrecognizable containers. This invisibility principle extends to your vehicle too. Those window decals advertising gun brands, prepper channels, or even hunting affiliations, they're intelligence for people who might be looking for targets. Your car should be so forgettable that nobody remembers seeing it. Think about what your vehicle says about you. A lifted truck with off-road bumpers and recovery gear tells everyone you're prepared for rough terrain. A vehicle with ham radio antennas tells people you have communication capabilities. Even something as simple as roof racks or cargo carriers signals that you have the ability to transport significant supplies. I'm not saying you can't have these things. I'm saying you need to think about what information you're broadcasting and whether that serves your interests in a crisis situation. Sometimes the answer is yes. If you live in a rural area where everyone knows everyone anyway, trying to be invisible might be pointless. But in suburban or urban environments, invisibility is your friend. And this is critical. Invisibility isn't just physical, it's also behavioral. It means not being the person who brags about their preps or posts photos of their stockpile on social media. Every piece of information you share is information someone else can use against you. I've seen people post detailed photos of their basement storage areas, showing thousands of dollars worth of supplies. They're proud of their preparedness, and I get that. But what they don't realize is they're creating a shopping list for anyone who might get desperate. They're telling potential threats exactly what they have and roughly where it is. The best preppers I know, you'd never guess they prep at all. They drive average cars, wear normal clothes, and keep their mouths shut. They don't have prepper stickers, they don't wear tactical clothing to the grocery store, they don't drop hints about their preparedness in casual conversation. There's a term in the intelligence community, operational security, or OPSEC. It's the practice of protecting information that could be used against you, and it applies completely to preparedness. Your OPSEC should be airtight. Only the people who absolutely need to know about your preparations should know. Even with family and close friends, you need to be careful. It's not that you can't trust them, it's that they might not understand OPSEC. They might mention your preps in conversation with others. They might post something on social media that connects to you. Information has a way of spreading, and once it's out, you can't take it back. That's rule number 1. Master the art of being forgettable, unremarkable, and invisible. Because in a crisis, the gray man survives, while the tactical guy becomes a target. Rule number 2. The 3-day window changes everything. Here's a timeline most people don't think about, but it's absolutely critical. When a disaster hits, you have roughly 3 days before the social contract starts breaking down. Why 3 days? Because that's about how long most people can cope with denial and mild discomfort before desperation kicks in. Day 1, most people think everything will be fine. They wait for help. They assume the power will come back on or the stores will reopen. There's still normalcy bias in full effect. People go about their routines as much as possible. They might eat the food in their fridge. They might even treat it like an adventure, especially if they have kids. Day 2, reality starts setting in. People start getting uncomfortable, hungry, thirsty, but there's still hope. They're still telling themselves that help is coming, that this will be over soon. This is when you see the first runs on stores that are still open. People are starting to realize they're less prepared than they thought. Day 3, that's when you see the shift. That's when people start making desperate decisions. The food in the fridge is gone. The bottled water is running out. There's been no indication that help is coming or that services will be restored soon. This is when fear turns into panic, and panic drives behavior that wouldn't happen under normal circumstances. I learned this principle studying the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the Texas freeze in 2021, and other real disasters. The pattern repeats itself consistently. The first 72 hours are your window to either get to safety or lock down your position. After that, the roads become more dangerous, resources become harder to access safely, and people become unpredictable. Let me give you a specific example from Hurricane Katrina. In the first 24 hours after the levees broke, people were still relatively calm. They were dealing with the immediate reality of flooding, but social order was largely intact. By day 2, you started seeing more aggressive behavior as people realized help wasn't coming as fast as they expected. By day 3 and 4, there were widespread reports of looting, violence, and complete breakdown of social order in some areas. This means your decision to bug in or bug out needs to happen fast, not day 3, day 1, preferably within the first few hours, because everyone else is making their moves on day 3, and that's when you want to already be wherever you're going to be. Think about the traffic implications alone. If you decide to evacuate on day 3 when everyone else has reached the same conclusion, you're looking at gridlocked highways, empty gas stations, and potentially dangerous situations at choke points. But if you make that decision on day 1, you're ahead of the crowd. Here's the practical application. When something happens, you need a decision matrix already in place. Not maybe I'll leave, not let's wait and see. You need predetermined triggers that tell you it's time to act. For me, those triggers include specific news events, local infrastructure failures, or observations about how my community is responding. For example, if I see reports of multiple simultaneous infrastructure failures that suggest a coordinated attack or cascading failure, that's a trigger. If I observe panic buying starting in my community, that's a trigger. If I hear credible reports of violence or social breakdown in nearby areas, that's a trigger. The key is that these triggers are decided in advance, when you're thinking clearly and rationally. Not in the moment when stress and fear might cloud your judgment. Write them down, share them with your household. Make sure everyone knows what the triggers are and what actions they initiate. And here's something else about the 3-day window that people don't consider. It's not just about other people becoming desperate. It's also about infrastructure degrading. In the first 24 hours of a major crisis, you might still have some cell service, even if it's spotty. By day 3, cell towers that run on backup batteries start going down. Gas stations that have power from generators run out of fuel for those generators. The supply chain that keeps stores stocked is completely disrupted. This is why your window to gather any last-minute supplies, to communicate with distant family members, to execute your plans, it's narrow. You can't afford to wait and see how bad things get. The biggest mistake I see people make is waiting to see how bad it gets. By the time you know how bad it is, it's already too late to move safely. The roads are clogged, the resources are gone, the social dynamics have already shifted into dangerous territory. I practice this in my own planning.
I have specific scenarios mapped out with specific triggers and specific responses. If X happens, I do Y within Z time frame. There's no debate, no discussion. When the trigger hits, we execute the plan. Rule number 2 is about understanding that your window of opportunity is shorter than you think. It's about making hard decisions fast, based on predetermined criteria, not emotion or hope. Because by day 3, your options have narrowed dramatically, and by day 4 or 5, you might not have any good options left. Rule number 3. Water is your first, second, and third priority. Everyone knows water is important, but most people still don't treat it with the urgency it deserves. Your body can survive 3 weeks without food if necessary. You'll be miserable, weak, and hungry, but you can survive. Without water, 3 to 4 days, and that's in ideal conditions. In heat or while physically active, you might have less than 48 hours. But here's what makes this rule silent. It's not just about storing water. It's about having multiple redundant methods to source and purify water that don't rely on things working. Let me explain what I mean. Most people's water plan looks like this. Store some bottled water, maybe have a filter. That's not a plan. That's a starting point. A real water strategy has layers. You need stored water, yes, but you also need to know where natural water sources are in your area. You need multiple purification methods that don't depend on electricity or fuel. You need containers to collect and transport water. And you need to understand how much water you actually need. Here's a number that surprised me when I first calculated it. A single person needs about 1 gallon per day for drinking and basic hygiene. That's just baseline survival. If you want to cook, clean dishes, or maintain any real hygiene, you're looking at 2 to 3 gallons per person per day. For a family of 4, that's 8 to 12 gallons per day. For 30 days, you're talking about 240 to 360 gallons. That's heavy, bulky, and takes up enormous space. A gallon of water weighs over 8 pounds, so 360 gallons is nearly 3,000 pounds of water. That's not something you can casually store in a closet. This is why your water strategy can't just be storage. You need renewable sourcing. You need to know where to find water, collect water, and make water safe to drink using methods that don't rely on infrastructure or supply chains. Back in 2016, my area had a water contamination scare. Nothing serious ultimately, but for about 4 days, we were under a boil water notice. I watched people flood the stores trying to buy bottled water that was already gone. Meanwhile, I filled every container I had from the tap before the notice went into effect, and I had my filtration systems ready. I wasn't worried because I'd already thought through this exact scenario. Let me walk you through what a comprehensive water strategy looks like in practical terms. First, stored water. I keep a rotating supply of bottled water. Not because bottled water is the best solution, but because it's convenient, portable, and has a reasonable shelf life if stored properly. I also have several 5-gallon containers that I cycle through regularly. These are food-grade containers specifically designed for water storage, not repurposed milk jugs or containers that held other substances. But stored water is just your immediate reserve. It buys you time. Your real water security comes from your ability to source and purify. Second, sourcing. You need to know every potential water source within walking distance of your location. And I mean every source. Rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, even swimming pools or hot tubs in your neighborhood. In an emergency, even questionable water can be purified, but you have to know where to find it. I've literally walked and driven my area mapping water sources. I know where the creek is that runs through the park. I know which retention pond is closest to my home. I know which neighbors have pools. This isn't creepy surveillance, it's practical planning. Water is life, and knowing where to find it could save your life. Third, purification. This is where most people's plans fall apart. They have one filter and they think that's enough. What happens when that filter clogs, breaks, or runs out of replacement cartridges? You need multiple purification methods using different principles. I have a gravity-fed filter system that uses ceramic elements. It's slow, but it's reliable, and the filters last a long time. I also have purification tablets, both iodine and chlorine-based. They're lightweight, compact, and don't require any equipment. And I have the knowledge to build a basic charcoal and sand filter if needed.
It's not as effective as commercial filters, but it's better than nothing. I also know how to purify water through boiling, which is one of the oldest and most reliable methods. Bringing water to a rolling boil for 1 minute kills virtually all pathogens. The downside is it requires fuel and gives away your position through smoke and light. But it's a tool in the toolbox. Fourth, collection and transport. You need containers, lots of them. In a crisis where you're having to source water from a location away from your home, you need a way to carry that water back. Water is heavy. A 5-gallon container weighs over 40 pounds when full. Can you carry that? Can you make multiple trips if you need to? I have a collapsible wagon that can handle heavy loads. I have various containers ranging from 1-gallon to 5-gallon sizes. I have a water bladder that I can wear as a backpack, which distributes the weight better than carrying containers. These aren't expensive investments, but they're essential for a functional water strategy. Fifth, conservation. In a water-scarce situation, you need to use every drop efficiently. This means understanding gray water reuse. Water used for washing dishes can water plants. Water used for hand washing can flush toilets. You need to think in terms of using water multiple times for progressively less critical tasks before it's finally discarded. And here's something people don't think about. Water storage isn't fire and forget. Water can go bad if not stored properly. It can develop algae. It can become contaminated. I rotate my stored water regularly. I add a small amount of bleach to long-term storage containers to prevent biological growth. I keep water stored in cool, dark locations to prevent degradation. There's also the issue of water for hygiene. People focus on drinking water, which is obviously the top priority. But in an extended crisis, hygiene becomes critical for health. Lack of sanitation leads to disease. You need water for hand washing, for cleaning food preparation surfaces, for basic personal hygiene. This is separate from drinking water, and it adds to your total requirements. The practical steps here are straightforward, but often overlooked. First, store what you can. Start with a goal of at least 2 weeks of drinking water for your household. Then expand to 30 days. Then look at renewable sources to take you beyond that. Second, have at least 2 different purification methods that work on different principles. This redundancy means if one method fails or isn't available, you have a backup. Third, know your local water sources. Take an afternoon and scout your area. Make a mental or physical map. Understand what options you have. Fourth, practice your purification methods now. Don't wait for a crisis to figure out how your filter works or how to use purification tablets. Get hands-on experience so you're confident in your abilities. Rule number 3 is simple. Secure water first or nothing else matters. You can have all the food, gear, and weapons in the world, but without water, you'll be dead in days. Now, before we continue with the rest of these rules, I want to share something with you that ties directly into what we're talking about, because I know how overwhelming preparedness can feel, especially when you're trying to figure out priorities and you're working with a limited budget. I put together a completely free guide that walks you through something I wish I'd had when I started prepping. It's called the $50 Food Supply Guide, and it reveals how to turn just $50 into a 90-day food supply for when life gets unpredictable. This isn't some theoretical plan. It's the exact shopping list with specific brands and prices, 37 essential preparedness items most people never think about, in the simple storage methods that work in any home or apartment, even if you think you don't have space. The guide includes emergency meals you can prepare with zero cooking fuel or electricity, storage strategies to keep everything fresh for years, and a step-by-step approach to scaling from 1 week to 3 months with confidence. It's all yours completely free. I'll drop the link in the description and pin it in the comments. Just let me know where to send it, and it's yours. All right, let's get back to these critical survival rules. Rule number 4, calories are currency in a crisis. Here's a concept that doesn't get nearly enough attention. In a survival situation, your energy is finite, and every action costs calories you may not be able to replace easily. This fundamentally changes how you should think about every decision you make. Most people approach survival with an action movie mindset. They imagine themselves doing all these physical tasks, building elaborate shelters, hiking long distances, engaging in confrontations.
But the reality is that if food is scarce, every unnecessary movement is borrowing from a bank account you can't replenish. Let me give you a practical example. Say you're in a bug-in situation, and you need to decide whether to walk 3 miles to check on a potential resource or stay put and conserve energy. The walk itself might burn 300 to 400 calories, depending on terrain and your body weight. That's roughly the equivalent of a full meal. Is the potential resource worth a full meal of energy? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you need to think in these terms. This is where a lot of preppers go wrong. They plan for activity levels that aren't sustainable. They think they'll be out hunting, gathering, fortifying, patrolling. But if you're burning 3,000 calories a day and only have 1,500 calories of food available, you're in an energy deficit that'll catch up to you fast. Let me break down some numbers for you. An average adult male needs about 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day to maintain their weight under normal activity levels. An average adult female needs about 1,600 to 2,000 calories. That's baseline. If you're doing physical labor, those numbers can easily double. But here's what happens when you're in a caloric deficit. Within the first week, your body starts adapting. You feel tired more easily. Your mental clarity decreases. You get irritable and have trouble focusing. By week 2, you're noticeably weaker. Physical tasks that were easy before now exhaust you. By week 3, your body is breaking down muscle tissue for energy. Your immune system is compromised. You're significantly more vulnerable to illness and injury. And here's the really insidious part. The worse your caloric deficit gets, the more effort everything takes. Tasks that burned 200 calories when you were well-fed now burn 300 calories because your body is inefficient when malnourished. You're in a negative spiral. This is why professional survivalists talk about caloric efficiency. It's not about doing more, it's about doing less but doing it smarter. The smart approach is to think like an efficiency expert. Every task should serve a purpose that justifies its caloric cost. This means organizing your space so you minimize unnecessary movement. It means doing tasks in batches so you're not making multiple trips. It means resting when you can rest, because rest costs almost nothing calorically. Let me give you some practical applications of this principle. First, organize your living space for efficiency. In a crisis scenario, the supplies you use most frequently should be the easiest to access. You shouldn't have to move 5 boxes to get to your water storage. You shouldn't have to climb stairs multiple times a day if you can avoid it. Every step you take costs energy. I've actually set up my basement storage with this in mind. The things I'd need daily in a crisis are at the front at easy height. The things I'd need less frequently are further back or higher up. This seems like a small thing, but over weeks or months, it adds up to significant energy savings. Second, batch your activities. If you need to go outside for any reason, what else can you accomplish in that same trip? Are there multiple tasks you can combine? This is basic efficiency thinking, but in a caloric deficit, it's survival thinking. Third, understand when to work and when to rest. Your body is most efficient at certain times of day. For most people, that's morning and early evening. The middle of the day, especially in heat, is when your body is least efficient. So do your physical tasks when your body is most capable and rest during the inefficient hours. I learned this lesson during an extended camping trip I did to test my gear and skills. I planned to be super active, gathering firewood, exploring, fishing, all that. But I only brought the food I planned to eat in a survival scenario. By day 4, I was exhausted. By day 6, I was rationing my movements because I could feel my body running low on fuel. That experience completely changed how I think about survival situations. I realized that the person who survives isn't the one doing the most. It's the one who's most efficient with their energy expenditure.
There's also a psychological component to this. When you're hungry, there's a powerful urge to do something about it, to go find food, to hunt, to fish, to forage. But that urge can lead you to burn more calories than you can replace. Sometimes, the right answer is to accept the hunger and conserve your energy. This is where a lot of people fail mentally. They can't sit with discomfort. They have to be doing something. But in a survival situation with limited food, doing nothing might be the best strategy. Now, this doesn't mean you become completely sedentary. Movement is still important for circulation, for mental health, for maintaining some level of fitness.
But it needs to be purposeful, efficient movement, not nervous activity or make work just to feel productive. There's also the consideration of cold versus heat. In cold conditions, your body burns extra calories just maintaining body temperature. This is why people in Arctic survival situations need massive caloric intake. If you're in a cold weather survival scenario with limited food, staying warm through proper clothing and shelter becomes even more critical because it reduces your caloric burn. Conversely, in hot conditions, your body expends energy on cooling. This is less than cold weather burn, but it's still significant, especially if you're working in the heat. This is another reason to time your activities wisely. Rule number 4 means being lazy with purpose. It means choosing efficiency over activity. It means understanding that in survival, doing less is often doing more. Your calories are your bank account. Guard them jealously. Spend them wisely. Because unlike money, you can't just go get more. Rule number 5, the fire paradox. Fire is simultaneously one of your most valuable resources and one of your biggest vulnerabilities. Understanding when to use it and when to go without is a skill that could save your life. Let's talk about what fire gives you. Obviously, warmth. In cold conditions, fire can be the difference between surviving the night and hypothermia. Fire also purifies water through boiling. It cooks food, making it safer and more digestible. It provides light in darkness. And perhaps most importantly, it offers psychological comfort. There's something primal about fire that makes humans feel safer, more secure. Those are significant benefits. But here's the other side. Fire also broadcasts your position. Smoke can be seen from miles away, especially during the day against a clear sky. The light from flames can be spotted at night from even farther. I've seen claims that firelight can be visible from up to 10 miles away in flat terrain on a dark night. The smell of wood smoke carries on the wind, sometimes for surprising distances. And if you're trying to maintain a low profile, fire works directly against that goal. It's a beacon that says, humans are here, to anyone paying attention. The rule here isn't never use fire. It's understand the trade-offs and make intentional choices. Are you in a remote enough location that detection isn't a concern? Then fire away. Are you in a scenario where other people are a threat? Then you need to weigh whether the benefits outweigh the risks. Let me give you a decision framework for this. Ask yourself these questions before lighting a fire. First, do I absolutely need what fire provides right now? Sometimes the answer is yes. If you're at risk of hypothermia, fire isn't optional. If you need to boil water because it's your only purification method and you're out of stored water, then you need fire. But if you're just cold and uncomfortable but not in danger, maybe you can manage without it. Second, what's my threat environment? Are you in a situation where you're confident there aren't other people around who might pose a threat? Or are you in an area where there's a reasonable chance of encountering others who might not have your best interests in mind? Third, can I minimize the signature? There are ways to use fire with reduced visibility if you understand the techniques. Let me talk about those techniques, because this is practical knowledge that can make a real difference. A Dakota fire hole is a design that significantly reduces smoke and hides flames below ground level. You dig 2 holes about a foot apart and tunnel between them underground. One hole is your fire pit, the other is an air intake that feeds oxygen to the fire through the tunnel. The fire burns below ground level, which hides the light.
And because it gets better oxygen flow, it burns more efficiently with less smoke. I've built these before, and they work remarkably well. From even 50 feet away, you can barely tell there's a fire burning. The downside is they require soil that holds its shape and the time and energy to dig them properly. In rocky or sandy soil, they might not be feasible. Another technique is fuel selection. Green wood produces much more smoke than dry wood. Softwoods like pine produce more smoke than hardwoods like oak. If you must have fire and you're concerned about smoke, taking the time to gather proper fuel makes a huge difference. Building your fire in a location with natural concealment helps too. A ravine or heavy tree cover can hide both light and disperse smoke. But be careful about fire hazards. The last thing you want is to start a wildfire. You can also be strategic about timing. Smoke is most visible during the day, especially against a clear sky. But at dawn and dusk, when there's already haze in the air and light is changing, smoke is much harder to spot.
If you can limit your fires to these times, you reduce your signature significantly. There's also the consideration of fire size. A small fire for cooking or minimal warmth is much less visible than a large fire. I've seen people build huge bonfires when a fire a tenth that size would meet their needs. Bigger isn't better when it comes to survival fires. But here's the deeper principle. You should have the skills and gear to survive without fire if necessary. Can you stay warm enough with proper clothing and shelter? Can you eat food that doesn't require cooking? Can you purify water without boiling? If your survival depends entirely on fire, you're vulnerable, because there are scenarios where fire isn't an option. Maybe you're in an area with fire restrictions due to drought. Maybe conditions are too wet to get a fire started. Maybe you don't have the time or energy to gather fuel. Maybe the tactical situation makes fire too risky. I remember a winter camping trip where I challenged myself to go 48 hours without fire. It was cold, around 20 degrees at night. I had to rely entirely on my clothing layers, my sleeping bag, and building a proper shelter. It was uncomfortable, but it proved to me that I could do it if I had to. That knowledge is valuable because it means fire becomes a choice, not a necessity. And when you have choices, you have control. Let me talk about alternatives to fire for each of fire's main functions. For warmth, proper clothing is your first line of defense. Layering is key. A base layer that wicks moisture away from your skin, an insulating middle layer, and a wind and water-resistant outer layer. This system can keep you alive in surprisingly cold conditions without fire. Shelter is your second line of defense against cold. Getting out of the wind makes an enormous difference. Even a simple lean-to or debris shelter can raise the effective temperature by 10 to 20 degrees. For light, you should have flashlights, headlamps, or even chemical light sticks. Yes, these rely on batteries or have a limited lifespan, but they're options that don't broadcast your position like fire does. For water purification, filters and chemical treatments work without fire. They should be part of your kit regardless. For cooking, many foods can be eaten without cooking. It's not ideal, but it's possible. Rice and beans need cooking. But canned goods, certain freeze-dried foods, even some grains can be eaten as is, or with just cold water soaking. The point is to have options, to not be dependent on any single method. Rule number 5 is about understanding fire's double edge and having the flexibility to use it or not based on the situation. Fire is a tool. Sometimes it's the right tool. Sometimes it's not. Knowing the difference might save your life. Rule number 6. Silence is a survival skill. Most people dramatically underestimate how far sound travels, especially at night or in an otherwise quiet environment. A normal speaking voice can carry 300 feet or more in good conditions. The clang of a pot or the crunch of footsteps on gravel can travel even farther. A dog barking can be heard for over a mile. These sounds give away your presence and potentially your activities. In a true survival scenario, especially one where security is a concern, noise discipline becomes critical. This isn't about paranoia. It's about understanding that sound is information, and every bit of information you give away is information someone else can use. Think about what your normal camp sounds reveal. Pots and pans clanging together tells someone you're cooking, which means you have food. The hiss of a camping stove tells someone you have fuel. Voices tell someone how many people are in your group and potentially what you're discussing. The sound of a generator tells someone you have fuel and power. Even the click of a flashlight switch or the rustle of a tent zipper give away your position and activity. And here's what people don't realize. In a crisis situation where normal ambient noise is reduced, sounds travel even farther and are more noticeable. There are no cars on the highway, no airplanes overhead, no air conditioners humming, no lawnmowers. The world becomes much quieter, which makes your sounds much more obvious. Maintaining silence requires conscious practice. It means moving deliberately, being aware of what surfaces you're walking on. It means setting items down gently instead of dropping them. It means communicating in low voices or hand signals. It means being aware of what your environment amplifies. Let me give you some specifics about sound and what makes noise travel.
Metal on metal is particularly loud and distinctive. The clang of a metal pot against a metal surface carries a long way. This is why military forces often wrap metal items in cloth or tape to prevent noise. Hollow containers act like drums. An empty water jug knocked over sounds much louder than a full one. Plastic containers can be particularly noisy when they bump against each other. Certain surfaces amplify movement sound. Dry leaves crunch, gravel crunches, frozen ground crunches. Wooden floors can squeak. Even walking on these surfaces can broadcast your movement. Water sounds travel extremely well. The splash of water being poured, the sound of water running, these are distinctive sounds that carry well. Here's a practical exercise I recommend, and I've done this myself multiple times. Spend an evening at your home or camp trying to do normal activities completely silently. Make a meal, organize gear, move around. You'll quickly discover all the small noises you never noticed before because they're just part of the background of normal life. The first time I did this exercise, I was shocked. I thought I was pretty aware, but I wasn't. My backpack had metal buckles that clinked when I moved. My pot and pan nested together but made noise when separated. My flashlight had a click switch that was surprisingly loud in silence. Even my footsteps were much louder than I realized, especially on certain surfaces. That awareness is the first step toward noise discipline. Once you're aware of what makes noise, you can start to mitigate it. Practical steps for reducing sound signature. Wrap metal items that might contact each other. I use cloth or foam padding between pots and pans. I wrap buckles and carabiners. Choose quiet gear. Some materials are naturally quieter than others. Nylon can rustle, but there are fabrics specifically designed to be quiet. When I'm selecting gear, I actually test it for noise. Modify your environment. If you're in a location for any length of time, clear walking paths of debris that makes noise. Create quiet zones where you can move without broadcasting every step. Use soft-soled footwear when possible. The difference between hard-soled boots and soft-soled shoes can be significant in terms of footstep noise. But this rule extends beyond just camp sounds. It also means controlling light, which is visual noise, that can be even more obvious than sound, especially at night. A flashlight beam or even the glow of a phone screen can be seen from surprisingly far away at night. I've read accounts of military operations where the glow of a cigarette could be seen from over a mile away on a dark night. The human eye is incredibly sensitive to light and darkness. What seems like a dim glow to you can be a beacon to someone whose eyes are fully adjusted to the dark.